Number 1. Footfalls. I really wish I could explain what happened in this story. That's the sort of person that I am. I don't just like to assume something happens. I like that everything has an explanation. But for the life of me, I can't figure this one out. It is a simple story. I was trying to get away from it all for a while. I do this once or twice a year, going out camping by myself. It's really the only way that I can feel like I am truly by myself, and I can unwind in a good way. About 5 years ago, I set out on one of my solo camping trips. I hiked out into the woods, looking for a nice spot to set up my tent. I found one, and I set up my whole camping site, prepared to spend a good 5 nights out there, all by myself. I recall being particularly stressed out that year, so I was really in need of the time. I had a nice serene spot that was not too far off from a creek where I could fish. The first night, sleeping in my tent, I thought I heard someone walking outside around the campground. However, when I turned off my lamp and listened, the sound seemed to have disappeared. Of course, I thought it was my imagination, and I turned my lamp back on. After waiting a while, though, I began to hear footfalls again. But like before, when I turned my light off, they went away. Eventually I laid down to try and get some sleep, and ever since I turned the light off in order to do that, there were no sounds. I slept very peacefully that first night, realizing that the noises were just my imagination. The following night, it happened again. This time, also while I was laying in my tent reading. It sounded like someone was walking around outside my tent, and just like before, when I turned my lamp off, the sound would stop. They would start again when I turned the lamp on. However, I didn't turn it back off again until I finally decided to go to sleep. The following morning, I had another fright. There were boot prints outside of my tent, and there were boot prints that led down to the creek. They definitely weren't mine, which meant that I had been hearing someone outside of my tent. It wasn't just all in my head. I thought about moving my camp somewhere else, but I figured that wouldn't matter. I also thought about going home, but figured if someone had been wandering around at night, they hadn't done anything other than that. None of my supplies were stolen. Perhaps someone just wanted to warm themselves up by the fire, I told myself. So I decided to stay where I was. It wasn't likely to happen again. But on the third night, it happened again. This time I got really scared, and I chose not to turn off my lamp. I simply lay there, wondering who this person was, and why they were intent on bugging me so much. After a while, I saw the shadow of a man walking up to the tent. It walked over to the front of the tent. He was messing with the opening of the tent, as if he was looking for the zipper to open it. He couldn't find it, of course, because the zipper was on the inside. There was no way to open my tent from the outside. After fumbling with it for a few moments, he got up, and I listened to him walk away. He didn't come back that night, and I had to sleep with the lamp on because I was so terrified. When I woke up in the morning, I discovered a bloody mess of something right by the fire. Whatever it was so messed up that I couldn't tell what it was. However, I took it as a message that the guy would be coming back this night. That was all I needed to cut my trip short. I stopped, packed everything up, and headed out of the area. It was a scary walk back to my car, even with the sun out. Number 2. Basketball. Although I grew up in a pretty bad neighborhood, it wasn't one of the worst. There was a bit of crime and violence happening all the time, but it wasn't like there were drive-by shootings or lots of murders or anything like that. Still, it wasn't great though. My mom was a single mother to us 3 kids. I was the middle kid. She had to work 3 jobs sometimes to be able to support us. My older sister was left in charge of us most of the time. My mom's most important rule was always that we had to be in the house before it got dark outside. I guess I was at the age of 13 when I didn't want my older sister telling me what to do anymore. And plus, I thought that I was bad enough that I could do whatever I wanted. A lot of my other guy friends would make fun of me for having to be home at a certain time, and that was beginning to get old. So one day after school, I went to the park to play basketball with one of my friends. This was in the fall, so it had started getting darker earlier in the evening. We were shooting hoops when my friend told me he had to be getting home and he would see me later. Normally, I would have gone home right then as well. I didn't. I decided I wanted to stay and play a bit more. So I was having fun, and I was positive that nothing was going to happen to me anyway. So I just stayed and kept shooting the ball, while the sun went down, and it got dimmer and dimmer outside. While I was playing, a big guy came to the courts, but he didn't have a basketball. There was no one else but me there at that point. He began watching me play, which was making me very uncomfortable. He was leaning against the fencing and just watching me. I didn't think that I could stay there much longer because he was making me that uncomfortable. But also, I felt a little scared trying to leave. I mean, if he was a bad guy and then he saw me leaving, he would think that I was leaving because he was watching me. And then who knows what he would do. I took a shot that missed and bounced off the backboard. My ball hit the ground and started rolling on the court. It rolled right over to the guy who was watching me play basketball. For the first time since he began leaning against the fence, the guy moved, and he picked up the ball. I expected him to throw it to me at first, but he just held it, and he kept looking straight at me. I put out my hands, indicating to him to pass me the ball, but he didn't. He just stood there, holding the ball between the palms of his hands. He had a really scary look on his face, too, and I really just wanted to leave and go home at that point. But I couldn't leave without my ball, so I told him that I had to go home, and could he pass me my ball? "Sure, I can pass you the ball," he said. But instead of doing that, he took a switchblade out of his pocket. He stabbed the basketball, and then crushed it between his hands, deflating it into a soggy piece of plastic. I looked at him for a moment, and he took the deflated ball and threw it at me. I was frozen at first, but then he took a step toward me. I took off running. I didn't live too far away from the park, so that was good. I didn't have to run very far. I didn't look back as I ran. I just assumed that the guy was chasing me, even though he likely wasn't. I ran by some people on the sidewalk, and it would have been stupid of him to chase me where other people were. My older sister was actually very nice about it, and didn't tell my mama that I had been out later than I was supposed to be. I guess when I told her what happened, she figured I learned my lesson. Number 3. Creepy Guy. I guess this is a pretty typical story, but it happened, and it was very scary. When I went to elementary school, everyone walked to school. There were not any buses, as the school was not very far from the neighborhood we lived in. Most kids walked by themselves, because parents felt it was safe with so many kids walking together. I think that made a lot of sense. I was an only child, and I would often be in the house by myself when I got home. I definitely wasn't supposed to answer the door or the phone while I was there by myself. This day I noticed a man walking in the same direction as I was on that day. He didn't seem to be a parent because he was not walking with any of the children. I noticed him, but didn't think too much about him. I got home and went in and locked the door behind me. Later there was a knock at the door. I didn't intend to answer it, but I was curious who might be knocking in case it might have been a friend of mine. I peeked out of the window next to the door and noticed it was the man that I had seen earlier. As I was walking back away from the door, I heard this creaking noise. I turned and what I saw scared the hell out of me. We had one of those slots on our doors that the mailman put the mail through. The man had opened the slot up and was watching me. "I see you. I know you're there. Open the door," he said to me in a creepy, almost teasing voice. I told him to go away. He then tried to stick his arm through the mail slot. He was able to get his hand and his wrist through easily, and he seemed to be trying to reach the doorknob. The slot wasn't big enough for him to do that, but I really didn't know that at the time. All I knew was the man was trying to get into the house. This was on a military base housing, and the number for security was on the phone. I ran and picked up the phone and called security. The guy probably realized what I did and ran off before security could find him. It turned out this wasn't the first time the guy tried that. Security had similar complaints about him. The next time he tried, though, he was arrested. Number 4. Heights. First, I need to start off by saying that I used to never have a fear of heights. Because of this, I was able to get a job that most people would never even consider getting. I mean, even people who didn't have a fear of heights would hesitate to take this job. I worked as a window washer on a very, very tall skyscraper. The job paid decently, but was nothing special. A lot of people would just not like to be that high off the ground, but that never bothered me. There were other things about the job that were annoying. If it was a really sunny day outside, the job could be really miserable. The sunlight reflecting off the windows would make you very, very hot. If you didn't wear sun goggles, or at least sunglasses, which everyone pretty much did, it would blind you. But even with those, it was really bright. Sometimes you wouldn't be able to work due to the weather, and losing out on paydays was also somewhat of a bummer. Beyond that, there were times when the rigging would quit working, and you would be stuck on the side of a skyscraper for a long period of time. There are tons of safety measures that keep you from getting killed. The washers always work in pairs and communicate constantly with each other. You wear harnesses connected to ropes to keep you from falling and dying. But even when you take the most precaution with the safety measures, accidents can happen. But the worst happened once, when I was actually having a pretty nice day. My partner and I were making good time, and everything was going like it was supposed to. It was a little windy that day, but nothing that would be considered dangerous. However, after a pretty strong gust of wind, something happened. There was a loud snapping noise that I will never forget in my life. This was followed by one side of the rigging quickly dipping toward one side. It was the side that I was working on, and I fell towards the side of the rigging, hit it hard, and then fell over the side. Now, I had all my harness equipment on, so I didn't plummet to my death. But I wasn't thinking clearly about any of that at the time. I was literally hanging there, some 19 stories above the ground. I was someone who wasn't scared of heights, but suddenly was contemplating what would happen if the harness broke, or if the rigging broke further. My partner came over to me to try and help me, but this was futile. He couldn't reach me, and I couldn't reach the rigging to climb back in. I just kept looking down at the ground and wondering if I was going to fall to my death at some point. I began panicking, which just made everything worse. I was flailing about, causing the rigging to sway a little bit, which could have caused more danger if I wasn't careful. It took everything my partner could do to calm me down, but I was only calm on the outside. On the inside I was terrified. I kept expecting something to go wrong at any moment. Well, if I died, I wouldn't be here to tell the story, so I guess we know that didn't happen. They eventually were able to get me back up, but afterward, I wasn't able to continue working the job. The incident gave me a crippling fear of heights. I can't even go on a roller coaster because whenever it gets to the top, all I can do is see 19 stories down and feel like I'm falling to my death. Number 5. Hell. I had a year where I lived in complete and total hell. Many scary things happened that I can tell you during the time period. It was the worst time of my life, and has left me messed up for the remainder of my life. However, it was the beginning of that hell that was the most scary. I was walking home from school by myself. I like to take a shortcut through the woods to get home much faster. I did this all the time. But this time, something was strange about what was going on. Even before I got to the woods, I felt like someone was following me. There were 3 big guys, walking not too many footsteps behind me. Every corner that I turned, they turned with me. And when I turned off the sidewalk in order to cut through the woods, I totally expected them to follow me through there as well. I was surprised and very relieved when they did not. However, my apprehension didn't go away once I was into the woods. I kept hearing what I thought was someone following me into the woods. There were sounds of twigs breaking and things being stepped on. I was nervous, and I wished I didn't take that shortcut. But I kept telling myself that my mind was playing tricks on me, and there was nothing out there. But then, I heard a voice to the side of me say, "We're gonna get you." It said it in a real sing-song manner. He repeated it several times. I decided that I needed to make a run for it. However, as I started to run, one of the big guys I saw earlier stepped in front of me. He was directly blocking my path and preventing me from going on my way. I stopped dead in my tracks. I was about to turn around and run back the way that I came, but as I tried to turn around, I saw someone coming at me from the side. I looked the other way, and a third person was coming at me from the side. Still, I tried running back the way that I came. I didn't get very far, as one of the guys tackled me to the ground. He got me by my ankles, and I went face first into the dirt. As I struggled, they tied my arms behind my back. Then, one of the people shoved a bag over me. I was taken roughly and shoved into a car. I couldn't believe it. I was being kidnapped. I mean, who would want to kidnap me? It didn't make any sense at all. I was so convinced that this was the end. I thought about Adam Walsh, and I wondered if I would be tortured like him and possibly beheaded. All the worst thoughts were going through my mind. After I was taken out of the car, quite roughly, I was brought into a building. They took the bag off me, and I was shocked to see that I was in some sort of office. Things were explained to me, and it was nearly as horrifying as the kidnapping. The abduction had been set up by my parents, they told me. They had enrolled me into this school, which is meant for kids with bad behaviors. It wasn't a school. It was a torture area. They fed us food not fit for animals. I recall throwing up once, and they forced me to eat the food again. We slept on the floor often, and it was always cold. The drinking water was bad. There were regular beatings and torture of all sorts. There was no education, just mental programming. Fortunately, I was able to play their game and get out pretty quickly. But that is not much solace for the other kids who had to put up with the torture and torment. Several of these schools, as they call them, exist. And thankfully, there is actually a documentary series coming out exposing some of them. Many of them have closed down. Imagine that, though. A place so horrible that the kidnapping was the least scary part about it. These things should not exist. Hey y'all, Killer Orange Cat here. First, I'd like to thank my paid Patreon members, my 2 VIPs, which are Chiamerah Cat and Pixie Hopper, and also Heidi H. I hope you like this format that I did. It's not gonna take over what I do. I think most of my videos going forward will still be some of the longer stories that you're used to, but I do think I like some of the shorter stories, so like I said last week, I might just go with that on the weekend, on Friday maybe. They're a little bit easier to read too. A lot of times when I read, I get very dry-mouthy and have to stop several times during the story. A few of these I was able just to get out in one really quick moment. It was pretty neat. Other than that, I hope everybody's doing well. If you like the video, hit the like button, subscribe, and hit the bell if you haven't. Hitting the bell, of course, will let you be notified of all the new videos. Please leave me a comment, and as usual, I try to get back to all the comments if I can. But let me know what you think, and share the video with someone you think might enjoy it. If you have an original story you'd like narrated on Killer Orange Cat, please send it to the address included in the description. If you want to join my Patreon, it's in the description as well, and you can also join as a free member. I would also like to thank all my free members, starting with the newest free member, Chronic J, Michael Vasquez, Bonnie Lynn, Collet Bond, Krista Pike, Prince UVA, HF Creations, Bonnie Gibbs, Linda Moore, DJ Lira, and Evil Black Cat. Thank you all, and most importantly, don't forget to make sure to check in your closet and check under your bed because you never know where Killer Orange Cat might be hiding. Good night.